Hello everyone and welcome to Tech Tactics Live episode 57. We are live here at PCA headquarters in the garage, and tonight we're going to be talking about this beautiful 996, probably the best 996 in the world. This is PCA's Classic Club Coupe. A little housekeeping, of course we want to thank our sponsor Pirelli. Without them, none of this would be possible. And of course I want to make sure and remind you to like, comment, and subscribe. Each and every one of you can make a difference by subscribing. We're trying to get to 100,000 subscribers. So please, if you enjoy the show today, tomorrow, whenever you're watching it, please give us a subscribe and a like. We really would appreciate that. So before we get started on the car, let's talk about the guests that I'll be bringing on today. I was trying to think of someone that's been around for the project of not only this car, but has been around for the very first PCA project cars, the 50th anniversary car, the 60th anniversary, the 73 911T restoration. And you know what? It turns out there's someone on staff that can help us out with this. And at the time, Manny Albin was past president, and now he's here as our technical director. Where is Manny? Oh, there he is. I'm not so sure.
I was in the basement cleaning up.
You were cleaning up. Now, if you giggled, that was totally worth a subscribe. But thank you, Manny, for taking the time to be with us here tonight. So let's go through the agenda. What are we going to talk about? We're going to go through the history of Porsche project cars with PCA and PCNA and PAG. How was this car chosen and what was the timeline for the build? Who determined which modifications that were going to be done to the car, and we're going to then do a walk around and check out the interior, the exterior, but more importantly, no one has really seen the undercarriage of this car, and tonight we're going to give you a view of what's underneath. So with that, we've got about an hour. I am going to not be behind the counter with my laptop, so I will be carrying my phone here and looking at the live chat section. So if you guys have any questions, just throw them in there. And I just want to shout out and say hi to the Rocky Mountain region, First Settlers, Milwaukee, Suncoast region, Las Vegas region, Houston. All of you, thank you for joining us live here tonight, Wednesday night. All right, so Manny, this actually started, all of these projects actually started when you were on EC. The classic stuff, maybe I can catch up a little bit later, but maybe rewind to the 50th Club Coupe.
So the 50th when I became national secretary, and that debuted in 2005. So by the time I came on, this project had already been almost finished and was debuting the first year I was on the EC. It was significant because it was a joint project with PCA and Porsche. I guess, you know, success has many fathers. So there's different people that take credit for it, but probably Jack Baer, who was our liaison, who worked for Porsche to the club, and Tom Bobbitt at the time, who was national president, both had a good hand in creating this special car. It was debuted at Hershey, which was the 50th Porsche parade, and it just sold out immediately as soon as it came out.
There were 50 units, I believe. Yep. It's California Azure.
California Azure Blue.
Yep. And then one car, I think the number one car resides at Porsche, and it was at Sports Car Together Fest a few weekends ago.
And it's also the only 50th that's a 2005.
Oh, because
everything else is 2006.
2006. And so one stayed with Porsche. There was one that was given away, I think, to a Metro New York region, Cliff, right?
Yep, Rosenberry.
Cliff Rosenberry, I believe. Yeah. He won the free
yeah, believe it or not, Porsche donated a car to the club. And we didn't sell raffle tickets. It was just every member got one raffle, one chance, and Cliff was the lucky winner. And I think he still has the car.
He does. He does have the car, and in fact, he brought it to this year's parade.
Yeah,
so we parked it actually next to the.
It was a great project, and it just started this relationship that, you know, has continued with this car we're looking at right now.
So after the 50th Club Coupe, now I wasn't there for the unveiling. I came on right after that, but the relationship, as you said, continued after that, and we found ourselves at Rennsport Reunion, but at Daytona, and there was a Classic display there, and Porsche Classic AG was displaying a number of things. And one of the things I remember is Manny and I were walking by this display of a front clip of 356. And so we were talking to folks at Porsche Classic, and they said, so, we really, they had an amazing program, but they wanted the US and club members to know that, Porsche AG Classic can do much more. And so we kind of looked at each other and said, wouldn't it be cool if we restored a vehicle with them? And so that's really where the idea of creating the project for Revive the Passion, the 1973 911T. And that's the car that we started with that was found on eBay. We looked high and low for a donor car, an early
and so this really starts your part of finding donor cars.
Yes.
And what was funny about this was we spent a good chunk of time thinking we had found the perfect donor car, only to have Porsche tell us that it had too much rust. At which point I got so frustrated, I remember I told them, well, if you didn't build cars that rusted, we wouldn't have this problem. We even ran into a 69 911S.
We did.
We found a lady who saw that we were wearing Porsche shirts on the way to an event, and she started a conversation with us on the airplane, and it turned out she had a 69 911S. And I remember how excited we were because it was in Washington, D.C., and we thought, wow, we
thought we found the unicorn.
We found it. It was rusty.
Yeah. And I think the only thing that she had modified on the car, it had a turbo tail. Yeah. I don't know how a turbo tail ended up on a 911S.
They turned that down. So the one they ended up picking, was it off eBay?
Yeah, so the one so every week I would send them leads to potential cars, and all of a sudden I found myself like, man, the well is really getting dry. So one Thursday, because I had to submit it to them like on Friday evenings or whatever it was, just new potentials, and I'm like, I just grabbed everything, and this happened to be a terrible car on eBay, and I was like, well, it's one more link that I can send to them. And I sent it to them, and Monday when I came into the office, lo and behold, because they work 6 hours ahead, they're like, that's the perfect car. And I remember reading the email, and I'm like, I had to read it a couple of times because I couldn't believe they decided to choose this car. But the full story of why they chose that car is because that car really was able to showcase all of the things that Porsche Classic and restoration, that they can do. Because look at the final product that they turned out. It was a gorgeous car that, it was, there was some actually a little bit of controversy on how we were going to restore it. Maybe you want to share that.
Yeah, so they're actually very much in awe of the way the Americans restore cars, especially with the Porsches, and to the level that they said that they didn't come out of the factory this nice, the way that we restore cars here. So they were very concerned that the way they restore cars is a little bit different in the sense that, for instance, the sunroof motor. They said in '73 the sunroof motor barely worked at all. So they could put a 73 motor in there, but they knew it would break. So they wanted to put a 993 sunroof motor.
Right.
And they were afraid that people would say, well, that's not authentic.
Right.
The undercoating, the early cars had had insulation that would absorb water and accelerate rust. So they wanted to use a more modern soundproofing method. And we approved that. So things that you really didn't see on the surface, we told them go ahead and use the modern version instead of recreating problems that we've already learned from the 70s. So they were very cognizant of who they were going up against when it came to restoration. So they really wanted to impress the American audience that they could restore a car just as good as anyone from Pebble Beach.
Yeah, and that car came out fantastic. And the photo that you see there was its unveiling at Savannah. And that car also ended up in a raffle. But this time you had to kind of buy a ticket for an opportunity to win it. And there were other modern day Porsches in that raffle as well. And a lucky gentleman out of, I believe, Washington.
Named Bud.
Yeah, Bud. That
85 years old, I think.
He won the car, and I could spend another hour with you on the story with Bud and his story with that car. So fast forward to the next project. We knew that we were coming along our 60th anniversary, And so why don't you share how that
That
started?
was so we were actually at the unveiling of the worldwide Club Coupe, which was done in Brewster Green, and we were at the museum for the unveiling. And I remember thinking, I think we can do a better job of building our own Club Coupe. And I guess after 2 beers, which is a lot for me, I got brave and I walked up to our contact from Porsche and I said, what are the odds that we could have our own Club Coupe, especially since the 60th anniversary of our club is coming up in about 3 years? And he loved the idea. And he said, let me run it through some people. And I think before we left Germany, we had like the preliminary okay. They really liked this idea. And we started the ball moving. And I have to say that when we did the 50th Club Coupe and when we did this Club Coupe, underlying it was always, what would be the perfect scenario, they would say. What would be your dream car? And of course, we'd always ask for more power. We wanted an engine that you haven't put in another car. And we knew that was impossible because, it's not the way Porsche operates. So in the end, with this car, it would always ask me, which model do you want to base it on? And I would say, well, I don't know the model because I don't know what you're going to build in 2015, but you do. So finally, they told us what would be around, and they said the GTS would be the best choice for this car. And they're very helpful in guiding us through different options. Like on that car, it had those Fuchs-looking wheels. And at the time, that only came on the 50th anniversary car. And they told us that's the only time you're going to see those wheels on the 50th anniversary 911. But we begged them to make an exception and put it on our Club Coupe. So they had to go to the board of directors for Porsche to get approval. In fact, they had to go to the board several times to get approval. For the car itself, to make only 60 versions of this car, they had to get approval. For the color, because that's the unique thing about this car, is they created a brand new color. They had us, a lot of people know that I'm colorblind. I can see blue though. It's red and green that I have the issue with, but Vu was there. Karen Cooper was involved, who became president after myself. And we picked a acid blue, I believe it was.
Voodoo blue.
Was it voodoo?
Voodoo blue. One shade darker than voodoo blue.
Okay. We'll double check that afterwards. Actually, it was 4 shades, I think.
Yes, it was shades off of voodoo blue.
We got 2 old guys trying to remember the past.
It sounds good.
But they created a whole new color for us, which was had never been done, and we didn't think they would go for it, but they did, and that was very special. And once again, they made 60, and they gave 1 to the club to raffle off. Surprisingly, they didn't keep 1 for themselves, and I don't know if they regret that because it's it came out to be such a beautiful car. The Ducktail at the time was also unique to the Sport Classic at the time, and then they put it on the Worldwide Club Coupe, and we were the 3rd model to have that Ducktail, which also.
So one of the things I'll rewind a little bit back to the 50th is, when they're asking us what is our ideal car, what would you want, as Manny said, a lot of times we don't know. But fortunately, we have NDAs with Porsche, and so if there's some things that are coming up in the near term that they're comfortable sharing with us, like I believe the 50th Club Coupe came with the X51 package, more power.
Correct. That was the first time it was the X51 in a 997.
Right, and then with the 73T, that wasn't so much. We were restoring that to a almost original. So there wasn't really decisions on power or anything like that. The 60th Club Coupe, again, we said we don't know what we want, but the GTS, they shared the details of the GTS, and they said that's going to be the latest and greatest, the most power, and it would be the best base for you to build this car. And what a beautiful car it is. I can tell you, if you've been to Works Monterey or Works Amelia or Parade, you've definitely seen these Club Coupes, the 50th, the 60th, and it's really cool to see them together. In fact, I parked Cliffs together with, I forgot who brought the 60th, but we parked them together at Porsche Parade, and they look so cool together.
The other cool thing is that is watching the people you're dealing with from Porsche, how excited and how much into the project they get.
Absolutely.
Because they there's little things that they do just because they think, oh, this is going to be a really nice add-on or a nice touch to it, and watching them get excited about the project, as excited as you are, really makes it even more worthwhile, because you know that it's not just a job for them. This is really something they're passionate about.
And hopefully all of you that are watching that are PCA members are also proud to know that the manufacturer is willing to do these types of projects for the club. I mean, just think of all the other car manufacturers out there. Have they produced, one-off cars or a series of cars for their brand ambassadors like Porsche has for PCA? It's a pretty rare thing.
Yeah, I thought 60, they probably won't do it for 60, but they love the idea.
All right, so you guys are just chiming in and saying hello, so hopefully you're just enjoying what we're talking about, but you're here today to learn more about the Classic Club Coupe, this 1999, if you didn't know, 1999 996, the first generation of the 996, the first water-cooled 911. Let's talk about how this all came about.
So if you've attended any of the live showings, I guess, of this car, especially at Amelia Island or at the parade, you heard the story about it started over burgers.
More importantly, In-N-Out burgers.
Yeah, I was going to say our friends at Porsche love, we introduced them In-N-Out one time years back, and they are huge fans of In-N-Out. So they were very happy to hear there was an In-N-Out near Monterey when we were there for Rensport Reunion. So in one of our trips out to lunch, we went to In-N-Out and sat down and started talking about the next project. Porsche at that time had just finished with Project Gold. Mm-hmm. They had that on display, showing the Project Gold was, they had an extra chassis, body and chassis for a 993 Turbo S. And so they rebuilt another 993 Turbo S, basically, from way back when. And they auctioned it off, and it was, very successful for them. So they wanted to do another project with PCA, and they asked us once again, blank slate, what do you want to do? What car would you pick? And so we threw around a lot of different models, but I think because it's the classic department, they want to stick with cars that are under the classic umbrella. The 997 was not classic yet, but the 996 was.
Absolutely. And for those that know me, they know I have a 996. I've always been a huge fan of the 996, and I think it always comes, it never fails, it always comes up. Curtis from Arizona asking about the egg yolks or the fried egg headlights. And here they are, the first generation headlights. Yes, the same headlights there were on a GT1. I love these headlights, and if you don't like these headlights, then I might just unfriend you. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, the fact that the 996 was entering into the classic book, and the popularity of the car was starting to grow. I thought timing and everything was perfect for it. Finding a donor car for a 996 probably wouldn't be too hard. And then, we started toying around with the idea of doing a car that's an homage to the original 997 Sport Classic. Then it started to get pretty interesting.
Well, one of the people that was involved and went to lunch with us, we had become good friends with Boris Apperdink, who's the head of Porsche Exclusive. And Boris was also the project manager. It was his first project with the Sport Classic. And, he and I had dinner one time, and he told me the whole story of the Sport Classic and how he created it. And it was really fascinating, and how he got all these approvals for the double bubble roof, the Ducktail, even the color was unique. He even said that Wendland Wiedeking looked at it and said, it's a nice car, but when are you going to paint it? Mm-hmm. Because it looked like primers. Yeah. Wendland Wiedeking, the CEO. But he got this approved. They made only 250 examples, and it was a European only, never came to the U.S. So, of course, anything that we can't get in the U.S., we want. And so we talked about having some of these features of the Club Coupe, but boy, we really didn't think they would do majority of them.
Yeah, absolutely. So, when you have Porsche ask you what would you like, man, that's a heavy load on your shoulders, because you don't know if you can ask too much, too little. But we felt, with this car, we wanted to do, and I'm not a huge Star Wars fan, and Manny probably knows more about Star Wars than I, but the word prequel got thrown around a lot. The prequel to the Sport Classic. What would the 996 have been had the Sport Classic been on a 996 chassis? So that's where it all started. Now, finding the car, before we go for the details of this one here, finding the donor car, it wasn't as hard as looking for the donor car for the 73 project. And luckily I came across this, and you can see in the photo here, there was a 996 sitting at Porsche of Alexandria, which is about 40 minutes away from the office here. And if you look at that picture closely, you can tell it's up against a wall. And if you look at it even closer at the wheels, you can see that the front wheels are turned to the right. But unlike other cars, the rear wheel is also turned to the right. So that car was actually brought in on a flatbed with a broken rear suspension, and they dropped it off right next to the wall. And it hadn't moved since the car was brought into the dealership. So somehow it made it up on the on their website as for sale. They didn't even have a photo of the car at the time, but I just looked and saw black on black, 99,996, and you know, it was a fairly low price. And then when I called them, they said, "Oh yeah, you know, it's on for sale, but we haven't been able to unlock it and get the hood open. We don't know if it runs, so we're not really ready to sell the car." And I was kind of under somewhat of a timeline to get this car found, bought, and transported to Porsche. And I said, you know, if you can get it running, I think the price that you're asking is pretty close to what we'd be willing to pay. I'll come down. And if you can't get it running, then this is the price that, you know, PCA, I didn't say PCA, I just said I would be willing to pay, because we didn't want to, you know, let the cat out of the bag of what this car was going to eventually become. So Porsche of Alexandria just knew that PCA was buying it as a project car, but surely they did not, or I didn't let them know that was going to go all the way to AG and become the swan that it is today. So there it is, non-running. So we paid the lower price. It crab walked up the trailer, and it took all those individuals at Porsche of Alexandria to push it up, and I towed it home with my Cayenne. So toast to those my friends that are watching every time I say something about
2018, we have the initial meetings at In-N-Out.
Yep.
This is 2019, early 2019?
Yep. And so now the car, now I'm trying to see if I can get it to run. So I have it hooked up to a Durametric. I'm looking at all the codes, changed the battery, and lo and behold, I got it running. It was, and so the reason why the rear tire was turned in is somehow the rear control arm was broken. So I really didn't need to fix it, but I needed to make it straight enough so that we could drive it up and down a trailer or onto a transporter. So I kind of jerry-rigged it a little bit and did ratchet straps on the anchor points, and I just pulled the rear wheel straight, and it was good enough to get on the trailer. And from there, it went down to Porsche Cars Classic Center in Atlanta, where Jonathan Sieber, Ray Schaefer, and the crew down there, Bucky, they received the car. Now remember how I told you I kind of rigged the rear? Well, somehow when the car was transported and it moved around, what I had rigged up became undone. So now it's inside the trailer, and the wheel doesn't want to roll straight, and it's pouring rain, and they're trying to get it out of the reliable truck. So I'm sure they'll share with you stories, Manny, of how much of a pain in the behind that was.
At that point, because you know, I leave the EC at the end of 2018, I term out. Had you decided yet with Porsche what exactly you were going to do with the car, or was it still just get the car to us and we'll figure it out along the way?
So yeah, yes, the answer is yes. We did sit down with them at Rennsport when they were.
I remember we went over a list of things we loved.
Yes,
because I think we also have to mention that Porsche at first wanted to use a 996 turbo.
Correct.
Because they said it would save them a lot of time, and we said, well, that's really the easy way out, because everyone's going to think, well, they'll start with a 996 turbo because it's a Metzger engine car. And yeah, that's a safe way out, but we wanted to challenge them and see what they could really do. So,
we had our list. Yeah. We had our wish list, and basically at the time, they had the wish list. I had to find the car, and once we got the car, they got the bill of health on the car, looked it over, and then they Porsche Classic in Atlanta shipped the car back to AG. then they really got to see what I found.
They probably said, "No, it's your problem."
And then then they started going down the list. Okay, so we'll talk about the list here shortly. But they started to go down the list of seeing things. Now it's different if you were to take your 996 and brought it to, say, your local independent modifier shop or whatever it is, and they just kind of did things to your car that you liked, and guess what? When it's done, right? But when Porsche is involved in this project, this is their name and their reputation, and they're building it as a manufacturer. Things need to be tested, and I'll give a very quick example. So, for example, the materials in the interior, right? If you took it to an independent shop, they probably would just grab leather that is off the rack or that they can order. Well, when Porsche does it, they're going to look and see the durability of the leather, the thickness of the leather, will it wrap around the panels properly, the glue that they use on it, is it going to last and be able to form the different shapes that they're doing. So there's just a lot more testing and a lot more controlled, how would you say, process when this car is done. So that just gives you a small example of how it takes a little while. Like, it might be a simple ask for us, but it's something that they have to go through and get approved.
So these shows we see where they do a car in like a week or 2 weeks, they modify a car, and like you said, they have an upholstery shop and they put new leather, but they're not looking at long term. Will this last 10 years, 20 years? They're just doing it for the finish of the show.
Exactly, and most of the times those cars aren't done very well. They're done for TV, right? So, all right. I think now, because we have, about half an hour, let's go straight into the car. And I didn't want to go through the list because I wanted to talk the list as we show the car. And folks, if you want to ask questions, I'm going to have my phone with me, and I'll be looking at that. But let's just start at the general look of the car. Obviously, the paint. Now, for those of you that are looking at it closely or have seen it in person, you will notice that this color is not the exact color of the original Sport Classic. Now, when we asked, or when we thought about doing the homage or the prequel car, we were originally thinking of doing the paint color that was on the original Sport Classic. Kind of halfway through the project, I guess, with our NDA, and Porsche was comfortable in saying, we highly suggest you consider this new color. So the original Sport Classic was a slightly different shade. It was not metallic, and they said you should really consider this color that's called Sport Gray Metallic. And we're like, that's interesting. It's not a classic color, but it's Sport Gray. So that's what they told us, and then finally, a little bit later in the project, they did reveal to us, before the public knew, that it would be the new color of the 992 Sport Classic. So really, it's kind of a cool story. This is a prequel, but it carries the color of the current version of the Sport Classic. So if you look at this closely, yes, it's a different shade, but then also it introduces metallic.
At what point did you find out that they were going to be coming out with the Sport Classic?
I would say about a year or so before, that we knew we were going to unveil around Amelia timeframe. So I would say it was about a year before that. Yeah, it all kind of runs together. But
at that point, they go to the executive committee, our executive council, and they get their input on a lot of the decisions of what they're going to be doing. When was like the closeout of the build? When did they finally have to decide, okay, this is it, we're going to build it based on everything you've give us input on and what we can do?
I would say
during COVID?
Yeah, definitely during COVID. But the thing is, there were always little changes going on, and there were like improvements or new ideas. And what's great is we worked, almost one-on-one with AG, and if they thought of something like that color, it was really a Teams call, and then we shared it with the executive council, and they gave us some color samples, and we make the presentation. So it was a collective effort, but there was many a times where we kind of changed direction a little bit, but it was always done together in a collaboration.
So the person who oversees Classic and Exclusive, when Exclusive does the Heritage Series cars that you've seen, like the Targa, the Sport Classic, so he knew that this car Classic was working on.
Right.
So he was probably the impetus to say, hey,
absolutely,
tell PCA this would be a great color.
Absolutely, and that's sort of the thing I was talking about earlier, is they know stuff that we don't know, but it's nice that they keep our project in mind and seeing that the potential things that they can link this car to, right? Of course, you know, Club Blau was a very big deal for us when it was developed for the 60th anniversary, and it would have been really easy for us to say, make this car Club Blau, but we didn't want to do that. But we also didn't want to discard Club Blau altogether. We wanted tasteful accents of the color. So if you're taking a look, you can see Club Blau was used in the stripes across the hood and the roof and towards the back. You'll see Club Blau. Damon, I think, is going to show you the Club Blau used on the Fuchs wheels. You can see Club Blau on the calipers. I mean, and inside we'll show you
wheel, right? The stitching.
the 12 o'clock marker on the steering wheel, the stitching on the seats. So again, just tasteful, the little plugins of Club Blau without being overbearing or tacky. Now the stripes themselves are pretty amazing. These are probably the cleanest stripes you'll ever see, and you would think that most car manufacturers today and aftermarket people just use vinyl, right? They just lay down vinyl. These are all hand taped, and this is all paint. So paint with clear coat over it. So I'll touch it, but when you see the car, please don't touch it. But you go through there, it's just a smooth surface right there.
Now, what they did with this car, which I thought was amazing, was they completely stripped everything off the car.
Absolutely.
Paint, even
everything came apart, so much so that it could go through they call it the cathodic dip, the anti-rust. There's a photo where this chassis, and it's just the chassis going into the bath, the rust proofing.
Without getting religious, it was like being baptized because they put it in there and it was like starting new.
Starting new.
It really
new.
Everything. You've seen where people will do acid dips.
Yeah.
But this is completely different. They're basically doing the whole rust proofing process again.
And they asked us about every little detail. So, you know, we talked about the headlights earlier, and if you know the first generation that are probably more fried egg looking because they have the amber piece here, or this part of the light is more amber. This is like the second generation, I believe, 996 light. It's not the it's not the 0.2 headlight, but it's the later generation where the egg part of it is actually the bulb inside, right? But this piece is all clear. We thought that was a cleaner look. We decided to keep the orange side marker lights just to kind of tie in a little bit there. You notice the front bumper. That is the front bumper of a Mark 1 GT3, along with the little lip right there. And that's pretty straightforward to attach to a 996.1 car. Come along the side here. You'll see the side skirts also from 996 GT3.1. Oh, and did I show you when you were looking at the wheel? The set of Fuchs here are a one-off set of Fuchs that were made for this car. So this is an 18-inch wheel, and this project required them to reach out to Fuchs to make this wheel for this car with this specific offset. And then you'll notice that you probably can't see here, but actually back in the barrel, Manny noticed earlier that it's completely black. It's not a silver barrel on the inside. And then this here is like machined and anodized. And what's rare, and I think the last time we saw this was probably on like a 964?
993 RS, I think, had the speed line.
The speed line, yeah, the speed line. But here we have Porsche on the wheel. And if, you know, we always say that the crest should be pointed to the valve stem, but Manny, maybe you want to tell the story of how this crest ended up being pointed to the Porsche.
The night before the debut at Amelia Island, they had to keep it super secret that we were going to have this car and what it looked like. So we went back to the golf course at 11 o'clock at night on that Thursday night to bring the car out of the trailer and to get it ready for its reveal. So as they put it on the platform, they suddenly had a small panic attack because they didn't know what to do about the crest, whether it should point to the word Porsche or the valve stem. And they actually made a phone call to Germany, and I calculated it was 5 in the morning when they called Germany up. And I think we actually went back to the hotel because they were in this very deep call with Germany as to what to do about this. And the next morning, we saw that they had pointed to the word Porsche. So evidently, if your wheel has Porsche on it, you point it to the words Porsche, not to the valve stem. Every other time to the valve stem.
So there's 2 markings on the side of the car that's very unique. And this here is the Porsche Classic series. And you notice it's not just stuck onto the fender, but it's actually inlaid, it's recessed into the fender. Or fender, I'm sorry. Move down to the side here. Guys, be careful of the light. Sonderwunsch. So that was applied recently at Works Reunion Monterey. You want to tell them about that?
I think when this project started, that wasn't part of the conversation. Was the special wishes, that's what that means. And that was a department that existed back in the 70s, where people who wanted really customized Porsches would go to the special wishes department, and there they would create things like the street version of a 935. So Porsche brought back that name. It kind of turned into exclusive, but then he created the special wishes again, where this car would be a special wishes car because it was a car that it wasn't like a normal car, that they made so many changes that it falls under Sonderwunsch. And they put the sticker on at Monterey, this most recent Works Reunion, because it's a sticker that any car they build with the Sonderwunsch label will carry the sticker, and it shows the year that it was manufactured.
In every decision, like I said earlier, it was very collaborative. But there's some cues here. If you look at this design, you'll probably notice this part here from Classic, Porsches, and the fender protection piece. But then you also had stripes, right, from the original Sport Classic. And how do you combine all that? And how do you still have the accent? And Grant Larson was the one that came up with this design. And I think he jokingly referred to it as the hockey stick.
Yeah, once you see it, you can't
once you see it, you can't unsee it. So he's from Wisconsin, and I guess he had hockey in his mind. But that's the hockey stick design from Grant Larson. Look at that Classic Club Coupe, and the font and everything. That is all thought out. That is not just randomly written in a particular. Believe it or not, there isn't like a font file that they have that just churns these designs out. That actually is laid out, and they adjust the lettering to make sure it looks proper. All right. So while you're pointing there, the brakes, I'll let you know the suspension. That is GT3 hardware on, again, this is a 1998 chassis, and that part I think adapts pretty easily to the 996. Now, the one that we weren't so sure was going to be approved was this very unique piece up here. Now, this car was originally a sunroof car, but we said, man, if you're gonna do a Sport Classic, it has to have the double bubble roof.
Yeah, this is, so we talked about this in the initial meeting, and it was like pretty much a given. There was no way they could get it approved for safety regulations. The car never had it. No 996 ever had a double bubble roof. So yeah, it was a nice idea, but don't think it's ever gonna get put on this car. So I have to say, when I saw the car debuted, I was really pleasantly surprised to see that they created a double bubble roof. And the interesting thing is with the original Sport Classic, they also ran into the problem because in the assembly line, it was only set up for either a sunroof or a non-sunroof. The robot would literally pick up the roof and put it in depending on what the spec. But with this car, when they came out with the 997 Sport Classic, they actually had a person by hand giving the robot the roof when it came by that it was a Sport Classic being built. So the fact they hand hammered a steel roof that was a double bubble.
Right. I mean, there were other ways to potentially get to this final solution, is to put a sort of a cap over top of the sunroof, but we never felt like that would be genuine. It'd almost be like posing. And they figured out how to remove the sunroof and then as Manny said, hand hammer this, and you can look at it's so beautiful, the way the lines and how seamless it is, and again laying down the stripes. It's very subtle, but once you see it, you just realize, man, the attention to detail for every single piece of this car is amazing. So speaking of hand-hammered pieces on this car, another request that we had for this car to have required hand hammering as well, and that is we really wanted the ducktail from the Sport Classic. I think that's probably one of the most iconic things on the original Sport Classic. So of course we wanted it for this car. Now the tail here is fairly easy, 997. Sport Classic, ducktail, fairly available, can be trimmed or whatever, modified to fit this car. However, this transition piece does not exist for this tail to be applied for this car. So once again, they had to create a one-off piece to be able to fit and match this tail to this car.
And it's worth noting that, you know, if you Google 996 ducktail, you're going to find different people who sell them on the internet. They do not look like this. This was actually designed in the wind tunnel at Wysock. They actually took a GT3 from the museum.
They did.
Borrowed it. They didn't tell them what they were going to do with it. And they put these parts on the museum GT3 and tested it out on the wind tunnel to make sure that it was truly an aerodynamic advantage. And I think that's where they found that this panel here had to be created.
Exactly. So that's they called it Frankenstein, the car that they borrowed, the GT3 that they borrowed from the museum, and they added all the aero that was going to be added to this car. They did all their wind tunnel testing. There's a photo of the Frankenstein, and they got all of that dialed in. And then they put Frankenstein back to stock, returned it to the museum, and continued on with our project. So again, that's the difference between doing a project like this with Porsche as opposed to your local shop. If you did it at your local shop, yeah, I'm sure they could kind of fashion it up and put it all together, but none of this would be tested, especially at high speed or in a wind tunnel. And those of you that drive your cars at high speeds or on a track, you know, aero means a lot and can, if not properly set up, can negatively affect how your car handles. So that's the difference when you're working with Porsche. So since we're back here, you're probably going to notice the Classic Club Coupe emblem there. That was sort of a change, sort of at the last minute. Again, Grant was in charge of, it was originally, or it's still the 911 Classic Club Coupe, but originally the emblem included 911. And as he started laying it out and the letters started to go from this end to this end, he's like, yeah, I think everybody knows it's a 911. What's special about it is the fact that it's a Classic Club Coupe. So he's the one that laid it out and we left off the 911. So a little bit cleaner there. But I think most people that are watching probably wants to see what lies underneath the ducktail. So do you mind pulling, just careful opening the door and pulling, or not even pulling, this they changed it over to electric. So that was an upgrade. So this car here did not come with the electric frunk button or rear lid release, but they upgraded it. And here we go. Ta-da! And this was our big wish for this car. We would love to have a GT3 motor and transmission for our base model 996. Now, for those of you that think, oh, well, you just find a GT3 motor and transmission and stuff it into a 996, it should probably fit. Manny?
Yeah, I got to admit that I was in that camp also. I thought it was very simple, bolt in, and stick it in, and it's the same as a regular 996, just a couple modifications, but there's a lot more involved to putting a GT3 engine into an existing non-996 GT3. In fact, if you Google it, you'll probably find some threads on Renlist that document that people have done it, and it can be done, but it's not easy, and certainly to do it the right way, the way the factory did, which meant taking everything out and apart. And I think they put a different firewall in. They changed the body and the chassis a little bit to be able to fit this engine and have all the hoses and the wiring properly routed.
All right, so I'm making note of time. I definitely wanted to show you the interior as well. I'll just open it up a bit here and kind of guide Damon. And then we want to give you that look underneath that no one has seen before. So I'm going to stand here and protect the door. So immediately you notice the leather. Now this is actually woven leather. This is not a pattern. This is not fabric. This is woven leather, and it's a fabric they had never used before. But when Grant saw it, he said, "We have to have this in the Classic Club Coupe." I mentioned earlier about when you have certain fabrics, you have to make sure they're the proper thickness so that they can wrap around and they'll last, and look that way for a long period of time. If you look at the dashboard, you can see the center tachometer carries the stripes of the car as well as the Club Blau stripes, the Club Blau stitching, Club Blau 12 o'clock. This car did not have a 3-spoke steering wheel when I when I sent it over to them, but we certainly wanted a center spoke, not center spoke, a 3-spoke steering wheel. We also upgraded the PCM or the radio to the double DIN unit. That's the latest classic radio that you can get for your 996.
The roof liner is phenomenal.
And also a first, the roof liner and the A-pillar is covered in perforated, what we used to know as Alcantara, but I think now it's called Racetex. And that's also a one-off for this car. And if you turn to the back, you'll see that they had enough material to create a little luggage piece for us.
Oh, was that a surprise, or did you ask for that?
That was a surprise. And I can't tell you how many people love that bag.
I think that illustrates their enthusiasm, because obviously they could take the easy way out and say we're done, but they saw that they could add an extra touch by having matching luggage.
Yeah, and they added the sports seats, which this car, of course, did not have. And then you saw the leather and the stitching at the back of the sports seats as well. I mean, everything is first rate on this car. You look at the door sill guards, the stainless steel, the Classic Club Coupe across the door sill. I mean, it's just details among details among details. All right, and those are the upgraded pulls. Well, not pulls anymore, now they're electronic. All right, so as promised, let me get this thing up and we'll show you what the Classic Club Coupe looks like from below. Oh, Damon also showed this to you all. Even the key. Even the key. Oh, look at that, it matches. Oh, and there's Club Blau. How cool is that? All right. All right, everyone, clear. So while this is going up, I'll share with you, this car will be here with us for a week or two. Tomorrow, actually, PCA's will have we had it at PCA's open house last weekend, and then tomorrow we're doing a reveal of the car here at PCA headquarters for about 2 hours. We'll probably have about 50, 75 local PCA members come through that weren't able to see the car last weekend. We're going to give them a tour of it. So Damon, if you come over here while it's going up, you'll really be able to see the GT3 suspension. So the coilover, definitely not your standard 996 issue. All right, don't go under just yet until it's locked down. All right, coming down. All right, so if you're wondering whether or not this car was done from top to bottom, just look at this bottom. I mean, you can, it is so clean under here. You could eat off the bottom of this car. It's only, I think, seen coming off a truck, moving to a display area, back onto the truck. Definitely has not really seen the road. Everything is so beautiful. Here, whereas where we were talking about the barrels of the wheel are black. And then just look at all the brand new GT3 suspension pieces. Here's a very good angle. You can see the coilover set up there.
And what's amazing for a U.S. car is this has no cosmoline.
No cosmoline.
Because it never went on a boat. No. They just flew it over.
Now, my question to you, Manny, is look at how the bottom is painted. I mean, this is a nice finish. So I don't know if a standard 996 would have had this pretty of a paint, or would have been more flat or matte. I mean, this is Very pretty down here.
So it's worth mentioning this car was literally built by hand because they didn't put it back on the assembly line. It was they got the body back, the shell. They started putting it all together by hand because obviously there's no more. They're not building 996s, so it's not like they could just slide it in and rebuild it. This was all done, put back together by hand, and I'm pretty sure they replaced every single part with new parts.
All new parts. All right, let's go to the crown jewel of this car. Look at that. The GT3 motor that we asked for. Unbelievable. I don't think I've ever seen a motor this clean. This is probably the cleanest motor I've ever seen. Even the new car has like stuff on it.
Oh, what was interesting we noticed right away is you can see wear marks on the suspension, which tells us that they probably tested it at Wysock and realized that maybe it needed to be a little bit tighter in the rear.
Yeah, because it was worn out in the middle there first.
So when we had Uwe, who was the
Uwe Makrutsky,
in charge of the project
Project
yes
manager.
man, he would say yes to everything we requested, or the executive council requested. I asked him how did he keep this a secret, because I never saw a picture of it anywhere on the internet while it was being built. And I said, surely a 996 with this double bubble roof would get somebody's attention. And his reply was they did it in very remote areas and they drove it at night. So no one could take a picture of it.
So you notice anything different under here compared to the either a GT3 or a 996? I noticed that there are a lot of worm clamps.
Oh yeah, we noticed that earlier. Yeah.
Yeah, worm clamps. I love worm clamps, but I don't really ever see worm clamps used from the manufacturer.
And we wondered if it's the Classic uses that, but not the factory when they build cars.
Damon, did you get the rear piece back here, the suspension? I mean, it is beautiful. It's like a work of art. And then this is you were talking about the oil earlier and the tanks.
Yeah, so we're looking at it. The difference, obviously, between this and a regular 996 is pretty vast. And this has a dry sump, and the oil tank is right here. So it actually has two places you can drain the oil.
And when was the last time you saw the exhaust system of the car really this clean? And look at that, bolts without rust. Here in the Northeast, usually we look at these and they're all corroded and gross looking.
Or even this little piece here that's not scratched up from driveways.
Yeah. There you go. All right, so, oh, what's this piece? I think this piece is a safety piece. I think this is when, should something happen and the engine dislodges from the car, I think this is something that buries into the ground to sort of anchor it.
Or hits the
It's there.
subframe.
All right, folks, so we're almost at the top of the hour. I hope you enjoyed this sort of detailed look into how projects like the Classic Club Coupe comes together. I hope you like seeing the details of this car. This car will be here for a couple more weeks, and then it heads to Audrain Motor Week. So if any of you are heading up there, we'll see you there and we'll show you the details in person. That's going to be, I think, I know it'll be at the gathering September 30th. And then hopefully you'll see us as well as this car November 13th at Unstock. And then from there, the next PCA event would be the preview of the LA Auto Show, Cars and Coffee. Recently, we dropped the 1 mile review of the 968 Club Sport. So if you haven't watched that, check that out. And I believe we're up to PCA Podcast 26?
27.
27.
We recorded 28 today.
We recorded 28 today? Wow. So if you haven't checked out the latest Porsche Club Insider, do so. We would love it if you would make sure that you chime in and comment, give us 5 stars. Again, thank you so much for watching our live episode today, Tech Tactics Live episode 57. We'll check you next time.